All right, friends, I am so excited for who I'm sitting here with today. I'm sitting here with my new friend, Paige Connell. Paige, welcome to Girls Night.
Thank you so much for having me.
For women who haven't gotten to meet you yet, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and a fun fact about yourself?
Sure. I am a mom of 4 kids. I consider myself a working mother. I am married to my high school sweetheart. I am a content creator and I create content on a few different things, but I think what most people know me for is talking about the mental load of motherhood in particular and the impact it has on us as women. And my fun fact is my first job out of college was being a production assistant for Lance Bass from NSYNC. And so that was my very first job out of college.
That is a very cool job. Like,
It was.
NSYNC crazy me, like younger self, is freaking out over that. That's very cool.
It was very fun. It was a unique experience for a 22-year-old girl.
I bet. Tell me how old your kids are. You have 4.
I have 4.
I have 2, and I need like 15 more hands.
I hear you. My oldest is 7.5, and then I have a 6.5-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2.5-year-old.
Okay. Yeah. So yes, you also have your hands full. I have 4-year-old twin girls.
Oh.
So we are in a very, I feel like we've made it into a really fun stage. They've all been fun in different ways, but I have more moments where I'm like, hey, we're doing this. This is good. Today was one of those days where I was like, are there 14 of you? Like, how are you guys? So it was like twin tornado day here.
That's funny. I'm a twin with a twin sister. And so that's my other fun fact. I've got fun facts I can pull out here and there. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot having 2 kids of the same age. My 4-year-old's really hard right now. The idea that I would have 2 of her is actually exhausting to think about. Like, she's so fun, but she is a lot of work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. I honestly don't know how long I've been following you on Instagram, but I love your work. And you're one of the first, I don't know how Instagram chooses who they show your things to. I miss updates from all my real friends, but I get yours like consistently. And I love them because they're so real and they're important and they're funny and they're just really relatable. And I learned so much. And so that's why I was like, okay, we need to get her on Girls Night. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
How did this start for you? How did you become a content creator about the mental load?
It just happened by accident. I worked in e-commerce in an operations role. And so we were doing direct to consumer business, selling clothing. And one of our brands was going viral here and there on TikTok. And this was when viral was like 100K, right? So they were like going semi-viral here and there. And every time they did, they had great sales days. And so as the resident team member who actually was on TikTok and consuming TikTok, I took it upon myself to try posting kind of secretly, which is why my handle is not my real name. I started posting just to learn about the app and the algorithm and how it works. And I decided I would just post about my life, I guess, being a working mother. And I was just sharing the everyday realities of my life, the struggles, the things that were working, that weren't working, the difficulties of navigating motherhood and work and all of these things. And I probably about 6 months in really found this niche where I was talking about the mental load of motherhood in particular, but as it relates to so many other things like the cost of childcare or the lack of paid leave and all of these different things as they're tied to the mental load. And at that point, I really decided I was going to take it seriously because I felt a sense of accountability and responsibility to the women who had followed me at that point. And that was, almost 2 years ago now. And so that is how I became a content creator.
That's crazy. That's wild.
Yeah.
So my hope for this conversation is I'm hoping you can kind of give us like a state of the world for moms 101. And this is for women who are moms, women who are considering being moms, or women who just want to know what's happening in other women's lives. I want to start broad. What are some of the common issues that moms are facing right now? What are some of the things that make being a mom and being a working outside the home for many mom particularly challenging?
Sure. So I think there's compounding issues, right? So there's the things that maybe are happening within our own homes. There is a disproportionate amount of work that women and mothers do in marriage and relationships when it comes to the domestic labor. So when we say that, it's like the chores, the cooking, the cleaning, the laundry, all of those things. Women tend to do more of that work. They do the bulk of the childcare. So when they have children, they tend to take on that work more. They're doing more work in that space. And we like to call that, or I like to call that kind of the invisible labor or unpaid labor that often happens in a home that is typically not as valued as paid labor outside of the home. And so we place a lot of value on people's times in their jobs, but oftentimes when they're like, well, I spent my whole day doing laundry, it's like, well, that's not that big of a deal, right? But it's taking up a lot of time. On paper, because most homes these days, the majority of homes these days are dual income homes. So there's two parents working outside of the household in some sort of employment. Even in that instance where both parents are working full time, women do more work at home, more unpaid labor than men. Men work slightly longer hours. And it's important to note that when you add up the paid labor and the unpaid labor, women are still working more, which leads to things like a leisure gap. Men tend to have more time for rest, relaxing, watching TV. There's a fitness gap where men have more time for fitness and hobbies, things like that, recreational things, which is why you'll also see like a lot of women talking about, my husband runs marathons. Like, I don't even have time to shower, right? There's this idea that there's more space for that. And then there's systemic issues that play into this. There's the motherhood penalty. So when women become mothers at work, they tend to be paid less because they are seen as less dedicated to the workforce. So they're passed up for promotions. They are passed up for salary increases, whereas men have what's called the fatherhood bonus, where they actually are seen as more loyal and hardworking when they have children because they are now a family man. And so they actually get paid more, not just more than mothers, but more than their male counterparts without children. So there's this really large difference in how we view men and women as it pertains to parenthood. And that doesn't even get into the issues like paid leave, where we know most women don't have access to paid leave. And if they do, it's a very short amount of time. And that ties into the inequities that exist in the home, but also the childcare crisis, which is impacting many, many families, but disproportionately impacts women. Because when polled, there's a survey from Gallup that recently just came out that shows that women are 2 times more likely to consider leaving the workforce or downshifting their career to accommodate for childcare gaps or issues with childcare. And so the burden of housework and childcare and all of these systemic issues tends to fall to women and mothers, which makes things like the mental load of motherhood feel all the more heavy.
Mm.
Sorry, that was a
This is,
mouthful.
yeah, it's so much of this is so personal to me
Mhm.
right now, obviously, because I'm in the thick of parenthood and in the early years. And while certain things are not quite as applicable, like I work for myself,
Yeah.
which means nobody can pass me up for a promotion, but also like if I'm not working, nobody is. And so
Mm.
the sick days like add up. Days when your kids
Mhm.
are sick add up. Um,
Yeah.
but the childcare thing in particular, you probably don't know this. I've lived in Tennessee for the last 10 years in Nashville, and my husband and my 2 kids and I moved to Spain 6 months ago.
Wow.
And so we're living in Spain for I don't know how
Who
long.
knows?
Yeah, for who knows. And we're here for so many reasons. But one of the things people say when we're like, hey, yeah, I've always dreamed of moving to Spain, so we did. They're like, wow, like must be nice. And I'm like, no, no, no. I mean, yes, it is. It's very nice. The thing that gave us the real push was going, I don't know if we can do another year of childcare. Like
Mm.
I truly don't know if we can do the math doesn't math. And we played with all the numbers of like, okay, well
Yeah.
then I love my work. And before we even started talking about having kids, I told my husband, like, I want to keep working. And if we're going to do this, I want it to be a 50-50 thing. Like we are
Mhm.
equal parents. I don't want to be the default. Yet the second kids were sick a lot, like their whole first year of like daycare, preschool, the amount of time they actually went to this super expensive preschool daycare is like painful. They never went because they were always sick. But so like the second there are sick days, I'm like, maybe I just shouldn't work anymore. But like, why am I saying that? It just happened. It just came out of my mouth. And so then we look at the math of, okay, well, so does it make sense for one of us to quit our jobs and stay home with the kids? And it's like, no, because then we still lose more in that transaction than we're making up by not having childcare. Also, we love our work. And also, what does that look like long term over the duration of our careers? Like, we want to keep doing this later. And so we took kind of a left turn that most people don't take. And we're like, well, we're going to like downsize our entire lives and move out of the country, as one does. But that is
Right.
that was the we just started to get like, wonder if there was a more creative solution than the ones that we were toying with that just absolutely weren't going to work. And so everything that you're saying feels so present. And especially when it comes to the mental load, I'm incredibly lucky to be in an incredibly egalitarian marriage. Like, I really, like, if anything, I feel like my husband came into our marriage better prepared to keep people alive than I did. Like, he's a much better cook. He's much more organized. Like, I mean, just so many things that he could do already that I had to learn. But I know that we still have to have conversations all the time of like, well, how much am I doing versus how much are you doing? And like, is this fair? And are you getting what you need? And I'm not getting what I need. Is that because you're getting what we both need? Like, are you getting double the portion? And then I know with so many of my friends, all of my friends, this mental load, this balance of who does what around the house, especially when kids come along, is the primary pain point in their marriages. It's a huge deal. Can you tell us, like, what is at stake here? What are you seeing in culture and what are you seeing, statistically? Like, what happens if this goes just unchecked?
Sure. I think the number one thing that happens is resentment grows in a relationship. And so that's like the number one thing I hear from women is that they resent their partner. They resent their partner because they have more free time. They resent their partner because they haven't had the same barriers in their career. They resent their partner because they don't do any of the overnight feedings and they actually get a full night's sleep, right? Like all of these things, these small things add up to this big feeling, which is resentment, right? Like you truly resent the person that you're married to, not because they don't love you or because they're a bad person, but because all of these little actions or inactions and societal expectations places pressure on us in these situations. And I think even the best intentioned people with the most amazing partners can fall into these default roles, especially when kids come along. And so you'll often hear from women, everything was great. And then we had kids. And then it wasn't great anymore, right? And I think the thing that is really at stake oftentimes is the marriage itself. Many people will tell you that they've left their marriages because of the unequal division of labor and mental load, because it just became too much. And when you talk to women on the other side of divorce or a separation or those things, they'll say, it's actually easier because it's one less person to care about, to like have to think about, to clean after, to cook for, but it's also one less disappointment, right? Like you're not relying on someone who continues to drop the ball on these things or doesn't see you or value you. You don't have that part of it, right? Because a lot of this conversation around the mental load or domestic equity is women feeling really unseen and undervalued, right? This invisible labor. When we talk about invisible labor, it's not just invisible work, like work you can't see. It's work that doesn't necessarily have value to other people. So like the laundry, for example, if you're a stay-at-home parent and you fold the laundry every single day in the middle of the day, your partner comes home every single day and there's clean clothes in the closet and they never know when or how that happened. They didn't see you put them in the washing machine or switch them over or fold them. They benefit from the end result, but they don't see the time and effort and work that went into it. So for them, it's invisible and it doesn't really have value because they're not accountable or responsible to it. And so they get to walk around life always knowing they have clean clothes and never really wondering how they got there. And so like in theory, they know, like they know somebody did the laundry, but they didn't have to really think about that. And so what I have found is there's this overarching theme of resentment that builds when this continues to happen in a relationship. And again, something I like to reiterate often is I don't necessarily think this is because individual people are trying to cause harm to one another. I don't think this is actually an individual issue. I think this is a systemic and societal issue. It is very difficult to navigate parenthood in the US, in particular, with all of these barriers like the cost of childcare or the lack of paid leave, all of these things. But also because we've kind of been conditioned to show up in our marriages in specific ways with subliminal messaging our entire lives, right? Even as young girls, I was encouraged to babysit. Nobody ever told my husband to babysit. Like that was never something that they told him to do. But I did, and I did it a lot. Like I babysat a lot of kids growing. I became a nanny. I worked in a daycare, right? Like I did all of this stuff before I became a mother, and so I was wholly more prepared for this than he was. And I think it's those things that add up and bring us to this kind of breaking point in our relationships where we either work really hard to course correct and to have those conversations, like you mentioned, to have them often, because you can't just have that conversation once. Like you're always having the conversation, or people choose not to proceed, right? If they can't get on the same page about what equity looks like for their relationship, they ultimately choose to end the relationship.
It's I feel like this bleeds into everything because when you resent someone, like that is such a big
Mm,
feeling. It is such a strong feeling and it bleeds into every part of your day. Like you feel that 100 times a day.
mhm,
You feel it every time you brush your teeth. You feel it as you're going to bed next to your person. It infiltrates your sex life. It infiltrates your
mhm.
friendship with your partner. It infiltrates your
Yeah.
like it changes the direction of your career, the impact you're able to make in the world, definitely how
Mhm,
you show up with your kids. Like it just really bleeds into everything. Being responsible for so much, having so
mhm.
little time for anything else, and then also feeling so unseen in all that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember vividly when my husband and I were really in the thick of this. We went to dinner. Like we were doing like the obligatory date nights because we're like, oh, we're supposed to go on date nights. And I remember we went to dinner once and we sat in this restaurant. I don't think we spoke. We sat there, we ordered food. Like I was like, I don't have it in me to have a conversation with you because I'm so like angry. I'm so frustrated and so resentful right now that I can't even find it in me to have a lighthearted conversation with you. Like I can't.
Mhm.
Um, and that's not a fun feeling for anyone, right? That's not fun for you or for your partner or for your kids to be in a house where that's the overarching feeling. And I think unfortunately for so many women, it's something they relate to at some point or another. They've kind of felt this feeling towards their partner for one reason or another. And I think it's important that we feel comfortable talking about it because when we don't feel comfortable talking about it, we feel really alone in it. And then we don't really know how to fix it either because when I was in it, I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know why I was resentful. I couldn't really tell you exactly what it was. I knew I was tired. I knew I was burnt out. I knew I felt like it wasn't fair that I was taking on a lot more than him. But I also had a really hands-on partner who was at every dinner and at every tubby. And like if I asked him to fold the laundry, he folded the like I didn't have a deadbeat dad in our house. Like he was such an active participant. And yet I still felt this way because I think it is so much more than being present, right? Like you can have a partner who's really present, who wants to do good, but not being able to explain the mental load or really pinpoint why these things are happening can be so, so difficult. And when we can't talk about them or we feel like we can't talk about them, we stay stuck in that moment. We stay stuck in that space and it's hard to change it.
How do we can you give us some words around the mental load? So like we're
Mhm.
feeling stuck, we're feeling resentful. I'm doing a ton. But
Mm.
also I see that you're doing a ton and you're here and you'll fold laundry if like I ask you to, or like so for women who are saying all of those things, what else is happening that is hard to explain?
Sure. So I think the mental load is actually the hardest part to explain. Because we could fix certain things like the domestic labor part of it, right? For example, the starting point for my husband and I was to start working on the actual tasks. Okay, I'm always the person who's unloading the dishwasher and taking out the trash and folding the kids' clothes, and right, like it's easy to like make that long list of all the stuff that makes your house go round and split it up equally. But for example, my husband could fold the laundry, right? And he could notice the kids' pants had holes in them and he might throw those pants out, or he might notice they've grown out of a pair of pants and he might put it in the bin to go in the hand me downs or whatever it is. But he doesn't think to buy a new pair of pants or to think, do they have enough pants? And if they don't have enough pants, where do we buy those pants and what size are they? And have they gone up a full size, or is it just that he got really tall and everything's too short? And right, like that's the mental load aspect of that laundry process, where it's like you can physically be the person folding the laundry, but the person carrying the mental load is doing all of this work that happens around the laundry. I like to talk about it as if it's kind of not just the task, but it's the knowing, the doing, the remembering that your toddler only likes mozzarella cheese. So if you send her lunch with cheddar, she's not eating it. Okay. And she's going to complain to the teacher, and the teacher's going to email you, and you're going to like have an angry toddler. It's knowing that, right? And so that's not a task. That's not something I can just hand over to my partner. That's knowing the intricacies of how the home is operating and all of these things that are happening. It's being the person who knows the baby's nap schedule, right? It's the accountability and responsibility to these things. And I think that's the difference, right? There is a very different thing between checking off tasks on a list, which everybody always like, don't ask me for a list, right? Like husbands all over the world are saying, just give me a list and I'll do it. And women are like, oh my God, you don't get it. And the reason it feels like that is because the list is only a third of the job. It's only a third of all of the work that's happening, right? And so you can take the list, but I'm still the person responsible for essentially being your project manager, to give you the projects, to tell you about the projects, to teach you about the projects. And that's not a fun place. Nobody wants to be managing their partner. And so when I think about like that, it's the biggest hurdle is describing the mental load of all of this, the invisible labor that is, I feel like, is the hardest part to articulate. Is that part, because it's easy to say, hey, you're always going to do the trash and I'm always going to do the dishes. That part's easy. But what's the next layer to that conversation? Because that's where it gets a little bit trickier to navigate and to really get somebody to understand the full picture.
I think that that's the like unseen or invisible is the word for that, because not only does someone not see all that stuff happening, but like, I don't know, even in explaining this is all that's happening in my head, like it's kind of easy to be shut down for that. Like, well, you don't have to think about it that much. Or like, well, why are you spending so much time on like, or that's not that much, that's not a real task. That's not a real thing. Like it just is. It doesn't have a shape. It doesn't necessarily have a size, or like it doesn't take up physical space. So it's easy to dismiss, but it's like, no. That stuff is, if you can add up how much time, like how many lists we have in our phones of going, okay, well, like, let's try this. Okay, don't forget this. And, we need Quinn needs a new pair of glasses this summer, when we go home. Like it's just all of the things. So how did you guys get, I mean, I guess I'm assuming that you've gotten through
We did.
to the other side. How did you guys do that?
Yeah. So I like to tell everyone it takes time, right? It takes time to undo all of this, because the mental load or this unequal division of labor that can exist in a lot of homes doesn't happen overnight, right? It's like a snowball, like rolling down a hill. It's picking up speed and picking up snow. And it doesn't just happen overnight. And so it's not going to be fixed overnight either. So I like to be clear that when I think about this, I think about it as a long-term project that actually really doesn't have an end date, because in particular, when you're parents, or even without children, our lives are always changing. We might have an aging parent who needs us at one point or another more often, right? We might have a change in our jobs that requires one partner to step up more in the home than the other. Our kids' schedules change, right? My two oldest are in public school. Now we have summer camp, and they didn't have school yesterday, and they didn't have school last Monday, and they don't have school next Tuesday, right? And that didn't exist for us 3 years ago. We just had daycare, and daycare, despite the fact it's incredibly expensive, was at least a bit more reliable, right? So it's all of those things. So we are constantly navigating these things. But the place where we started was probably where everybody starts, which is it wasn't graceful, right? There was a lot of fights about the dishwasher or the trash or whatever. And they weren't productive. They were not productive. It would be me expressing frustration, him saying, well, just tell me what to do. And me being like, you just don't get it. It was a whole thing. And the way my aha moment was actually hearing Eve Rodsky on a podcast talk about her book and method, Fair Play. And I am now a Fair Play facilitator, because I'm like this was my aha moment. And essentially, it's a book that really kind of puts together some of these pieces, but ultimately there is a game that goes along with it that helps you navigate the conversation. And I like to think of fair play as part of our toolbox. It's not the only thing we did. And I think if we'd only done that alone, we wouldn't have been successful, because I think that really is like really the domestic labor part of it and not all of the other things. But for me, and I recommend it to so many people, like that is such a great point to start at, to read some books to educate yourself on this topic. I read Fed Up by Gemma Hartley, Emotional Labor by Rose Hackman. These were all books that allowed me to start learning how to articulate what was happening. Prior to that, I couldn't say what was happening. And I think that's step one. You need to be able to say what's happening. You need to be able to articulate it in a way that your partner can understand and that can lead to a productive conversation, right? And I think that's where a lot of us fall, because we're just arguing tit for tat about these things and trying to get 50-50 when we're not really saying what's happening or why it's frustrating or all these things. And so that's where I would start. I always recommend start to learn the language, kind of educate yourself, listen to podcasts, read books, whatever works best for you. And then find a goal, right? Decide on your goal in this conversation, because for some women, the goal is, I just want to be acknowledged. I just want you to see it. I just want you to know that it's happening. I just want you to appreciate the work. I want it to have value. I don't mind carrying the mental load, but I would like you to know that I'm doing it. Like I would like to feel seen and not dismissed. And that might be the goal, right? For others, the goal is no, I need 50% of this work off my plate. I'm drowning. And in order for that to happen, I need you to step up. And this is where I think we can do that. And so I think there's that step of identifying what's happening. But before you even start the work, you have to know what the end goal is, because everybody's end goal is a little bit different. And if we're all running at the same thing, but we don't have the same goal in mind, it doesn't really get anywhere.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love that you mentioned Eve and Fair Play. We've had her on the show before, and it was
great.
fantastic. And so Carl and I have done the Fair Play cards also. And I feel like, so I told you that when we got married, I just felt like knew how to do so many things that I didn't know how to do. And so us in like our marriage before kids was sort of me catching up of like, okay, well, how do you keep the kitchen clean? Like what is our method? What's our like standard of what's our standard?
Care. Yeah.
And then when we had kids, it was like that. I mean, so many things were hard about life with two babies, but like the hardest thing between us was that we both were so exhausted and we were both doing so much. And I think both of us kind of secretly thought that if the other one was working as hard as we were, it would be easier. And so that was like probably the biggest time in our whole marriage that we have had that resentment, and it was on both sides. And I think it was on both sides because we did have two babies, and so we both were like. We
That's
both
a lot.
were, we were, but it was a very serious 2-person job for a very long time. But so we did the Fair Play cards, and it was so helpful to be like, okay, our biggest takeaway, we've done it, I think 3 times now. One of them was just like 2 weeks ago, because we're like, we have a different set of things now that we're in Spain, and like our division's a little bit different. But our takeaway was not, wow, I'm doing so much and you're doing nothing. Here's half my stack. It was, oh my gosh, we are both doing so much. And even that though was like, I mean, one of our takeaways was, how is anyone else doing this? Like, how does any of other family get through the day? Like, I don't understand, because we are just up to our eyeballs. But then it really did help us. It even if we didn't trade any cards back or jobs back and forth, seeing the other person and going, oh my gosh, you really are doing so much. And it's not that you're lazy and so I'm carrying all of it. It's just that we are carrying too much. And that's just what life looks like right now. But it has been cool. In the last time that we did it a couple weeks ago, it was the most peaceful it's ever been. Like it was the easiest it's ever been. Like, hey, I'll do let me take that. Okay, yeah, I'll do that. Oh man, it'd be really great if I could have these couple hours. Yep, I can totally give you those. Like it really was that easy. And I'm like, wow, this has gotten better. it also was helpful that we had some things that were just not on our plate anymore, like car maintenance. We don't own a car anymore. And so that's
Yeah.
that part of it is, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. The more you do this, the more you flex this muscle, the more it just becomes a conversation and not a fight, right? So last week, we're in wintertime here in Massachusetts where I live, and the kids had to bring snow gear to school. And I had gotten an email and I was on the phone with my husband. I was like, later on, we had to pack the kids' snow stuff for school. Just FYI, if you can help me with that later. And I just said it in passing. And then I ran around and did pickups and drop offs for dance class and all that. And I came home and he had packed all the snow stuff. And I was like, oh, thanks. And he's never packed the snow stuff before because it's always fallen in my bucket of stuff to do. And he did it. And I was like, that's great. And then as we're eating dinner, I was like, hey, did you make sure to label everything? And he was like, no, I didn't. And he's like, we have to do that. And I was like, yeah, you got to label every single thing that goes to school, but especially the snow gear. And I was like, okay, so we have to label everything. And then he had like very neatly packed them all into these small canvas reusable bags. And I was like, hey, a big part of this is that the kids have to be able to get things in and out of this bag on their own. And all of our kids are young. And I'm like, there's no way a 6-year-old can like Tetris this stuff back into this bag on her own. Like, it's not going to happen. We need a new bag, right? And so I had to teach him this task. I had to say like, hey, if you're going to do the snow gear, right, you have to label everything. You have to have it in a bag that is both waterproof, but also the kids can navigate on their own. Even the 2-year-old, she mostly does this on her own at school. And so we need to set them up for success here. If we send them with this canvas bag, it's not going to work out. And my husband didn't get mad. He didn't get defensive. He didn't like grunt and moan because we had to redo the task. I didn't yell. I didn't get mad. Like, it was a conversation because we've done this long enough that I'm not mad at him that he doesn't know this task. It's always been my task. He was doing this to be helpful, and I can't be mad at him that he doesn't know that. I don't resent him for not knowing that. That's never been his to own. But in the same way that when he was at work this week and it snowed and I was trying to figure out how to turn the snowblower on, I'm like calling him, I'm like, I don't know how to do it. Tell me how to turn this snowblower on, right? We're not getting mad at each other for not knowing these things anymore because we're doing so much, to your point. Like, I know how much he's doing. He knows how much I am doing. And I know that he had good intentions. And I think that's the other thing. Oftentimes when we're in that place of resentment, we can feel as though our partner doesn't have good intentions in what they're doing, that they're not thinking about us or wanting to help us or understanding that their behaviors impact us in a negative way. Like, oh, he didn't take out the trash. Like, that's almost a slap in the face to me. Like, how disrespectful. When in reality, they probably didn't have like ill intent, right? There probably was not ill intent behind that. I think the more that you flex this muscle, the more that you are working together on this, the more that it really is a team effort, the less likely it is that those huge emotions will come into play when you talk about something like packing snow gear for your kids. When you're not in a good place, those things feel really heavy. Like that could have led to a disagreement for sure.
Yeah, those things are huge when you don't have the language or the practice working through those things, because you're telling one person is hearing you're stupid and you do everything wrong.
Yeah.
And also, I don't like, thanks for your nice gesture, but like, take it back. Like,
not good
you
enough.
wasted your time. Yeah, not good enough. Don't care. I receive no love from that. You wasted your time. And then the other person is like, must I do everything? Like, must I do everything? The weight of the world is on my shoulders, and my person
Exactly
can't help me at all. And that's a terrible thing. You have giant blow up fights about how the dishwasher is loaded or snow gear.
Yeah. And none of us want to be fighting about these things, right? And I often tell people that there's a lot of hard work that goes into this. But on the other side of this work, there's time. There's time and there's space and there's energy, right? Like, I have energy to think about planning a date night. I have time to spend planning that date night and finding childcare. Prior to that, I didn't have time. I didn't have energy. I didn't have space to do those things for my marriage or even for myself, right? I didn't have time to think about myself or my own well-being. And in motherhood, oftentimes we lose our identities, right? And sometimes it's because there's just simply not enough time for ourselves. I tell people all the time, you gain back that time, and it might take work to get there, but on the other side, right? Hopefully you're working within a well-oiled machine that is your home and your family. So that way now you all have a bit more time to actually enjoy the life you've created with each other. Enjoy your kids, enjoy your partner, enjoy your free time. That's the ultimate goal. It's not just to like be militant or corporate about how your home runs. It's doing that in an effort to be thriving.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that there are some women who are sitting here going like, yeah, I would love this.
Mm,
I would love some help with this. I would love for things to look different. But they're
mm,
wondering what their person is going to say when they say, hey, like, we need to talk about this.
mm.
Um, or hey, I have a deck of cards that I want to go through with you.
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
that's a scary conversation. And I feel like there's the fear that it's not going to go well.
Yeah. The number one thing that people will say to me is that their partner gets defensive. I bring this up and they go, wait a minute, like I'm doing all of this, or, I work 60 hours a week, or nothing I ever do is good enough, whatever it might be, right? There's this, I think historically, a lot of times when people bring this up, they are met with that defense mechanism from their partner. And sometimes it looks like anger. Sometimes it looks like shame. I think a lot of men will say, like, it feels like you're telling me I'm a bad dad or I'm a bad husband and that, like, I'm awful. And that's what my partner said. He's like, it feels like every time you say this, you're telling me that I'm a bad dad. And I'm like, you're not a bad dad, but I do need you to take out the trash when you say you will. And that has nothing to do with you being a good dad or not. It just has to do with our home being as functioning as possible, right? And no one person being burnt out. And so what I highly recommend as much as we possibly can, and I'm not going to say I'm always great at this either, but in order to have a productive conversation, it often doesn't happen in the heat of the moment, right? It does not happen when you feel like your partner has dropped the ball and you want to call them out on it right then and there. It's usually not going to be productive. And so I think it is important to have examples, right? So when you come to a conversation, I think it's important to say, like, hey, remember that time you packed the snow gear for the kids and you were frustrated that I was frustrated that it wasn't right? I want to use that as an example for us to talk about how this could look different, how it can be better, how we can avoid arguments like this, right? If you go into this conversation with a lot of intentionality and again, with that goal in mind, which is like, maybe the goal is, I want you and I to have more time to be together. And I feel like right now we're spending so much time talking about chores and coordinating schedules, and we don't actually get any time to enjoy one another. I think doing this is going to help us get there. I think if we can find some equity when it comes to the chores or the mental labor, or maybe it's the childcare, whatever it might be, if we can come together and find how to navigate this more equitably, I think we're going to have more time for one another. And I know I'll be happier, and I hope that you'll be happier, right? And without saying, hey, I've added up every single thing I do in this house. It's 10 times as much as you do. You need to do more, right? Like that, it doesn't bear the fruit that you're hoping it will. Even if
Yeah.
that's your like instinct. And it was my instinct many, many times to just want your partner to hear you and to feel validated. But we do sometimes have to approach these conversations with that end goal in mind, but with intentionality. We're going to sit down and this is how we're going to do it. Whether it's fair play or there's a lot of now there's a lot of apps out there to help you do this, to kind of really delegate tasks and to manage them within a system that lives and breathes and gets updated. Whatever tends to work for you and your partner and how you best thrive. But I think if you're going to have the conversation, it is best to do it with as much intention as possible and feeling as best equipped as possible. So, going back to that ability to be able to articulate it, being able to feel really confident in being able to describe what's happening to your partner. And I also think giving them space to come to the conversation and say, like, hey, maybe next Sunday we could go grab coffee. And when we grab coffee, I'm hoping we can talk about this thing. I know I have a lot of like things I think we could do better. Maybe you could come with things that you think we could do better and then we can talk together. I do want to put this like small like caveat here, which is that you really have to have like a willing and able partner who's capable of change and evolution and who genuinely loves you and wants you to be happy. Unfortunately, like there's many, many women who come to me and say, like, my partner, I don't think cares whether I'm happy or not, or is not willing to change. We've talked about this a lot and we've done therapy and they're not willing to change. Unfortunately, that is a roadblock that some people might come up against. And that is maybe when you talk to your partner about different things. But I think most men that I know want to be good dads and want to be good husbands and are willing to have this conversation because they want their partner to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah. I love all of that. One of the things that I know Eve talks about in Fair Play, and the reason that I know she put the cards together and like the reason
Yeah.
a tool is helpful is because I think it's really hard to demonstrate the magnitude of what you're talking about. Like
Mm-hmm.
until you have something physical in front of you, whether it's a list or whether it's cards or like whatever it is, to say, this is what we're doing, this is what we're in charge of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in our lives to keep our lives running. Who's doing this stuff? And you're starting to like make piles. It just is really hard to describe. It's just it's really hard to find equity when you're like, okay, but who does Christmas cards? Well, that happens once a year.
Mm,
If you're not anywhere near Christmas, you're not even going to think about those. And
right.
like, so having a moment where you're like, is this a thing we care about? And who's in charge of it?
Mm-hmm. I like to call it making the invisible visible. I do a series on my Instagram here and there where I say, like, hi, I'm Paige, I'm a mama four, and I'm on a mission to make invisible labor visible. Because I think so much of this is invisible to your point. And if you're not thinking about it or seeing it, or it lives in your brain, I like to think about the mental load as this running to-do list in your brain. If it's just living in your brain, nobody else sees it or knows it. And so what I really encourage people to do before a conversation too is not just the fair play tasks themselves, which I think are incredibly helpful, but I like to keep my mental to-do list sometimes in like my reminders app on my phone and really take every little thought. And I know it's a little bit of work, but like take every little thought out of your brain and put it on paper. So like I'm looking at my reminders today. I have 22 due today. That's a lot. 22 reminders that I need to do. And like I'm looking at them, it's like buy a birthday present, schedule the play date for Saturday, intro to so-and-so's dad, renew the dog's license, book the orthodontist appointment, check our passports because we filed for a new passport. Like this is all the things that are in my brain that are not necessarily tied to a task, right? Scheduling the play date is kind of under a task on fair play, but this is like a very specific thing that I have to text a mom about, right? Like, and that is different. And so I encourage people to, even for themselves, even if it's not for their partner, but even just to validate for themselves why they might be feeling overwhelmed, to make that invisible work visible. Put pen to paper for a week or 2 days. I have 22 today. Like it's enough to just look at one day and say
Yeah.
like, okay, this is a lot. This is a lot. And to your point, like you and your partner, this is a lot. And how are we doing this? And what are my strengths? What are your strengths? What can we outsource, if anything? And maybe it's nothing. Maybe you can. What are we going to drop? Maybe we're not doing Christmas cards this year.
Yeah.
That's okay. Maybe we're not doing the play date on Saturday. That's okay. Like it's all okay. But doing that work of making that invisible work visible can be enlightening even for ourselves because sometimes we can't even quantify all of the things that are overwhelming us because they're just small little things that pop up throughout our days. And they don't fall into a clean little bucket of laundry, for example.
Yeah. Yes. We when we have done this, we always are like adding things in or crossing things
Yeah.
out, or like
Yeah.
we have like just note cards shoved in because we're like, well, you make sure that I feed them, but you make sure that they're actually getting like nutrients. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
something. My husband cooks, I do not. But I feed our kids like most of their meals because I'm the person in charge
Yeah.
during most of those times. But I'm like, can you just like make intermittent smoothies to make sure that like we're getting enough things that are green. So I'll make sure
Mm.
we're like mostly fed, but I need you to make sure that like we're rounded out for me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you get to get creative about it. And I think
For
too,
sure.
even if you feel like we're like we are equal in the way that we do things, a lot of the work that Carla and I have been doing over the last couple of years in this is trying to figure out there are always things that kind of fall in the middle. And then we're both worrying about them. And those are the
Mm-hmm.
things that we're fighting about. And so it's like, okay, whose job is it actually to do this thing?
Mm-hmm.
Let's assign it so that we don't have two people wasting mental time and energy on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know that it's actually going to get done. And like we can then take it out of our brain and just completely forget about it. We were like
Yeah.
doubling up a lot and then also
Yeah.
missing a couple things.
Yeah, I think there's that. And then there's also being able to support one another, right? So I think about one of my parents passed away a few years ago. And during the initial time right after, right, there was so much to do. Like I had to do so many things that I've never done before. And that obviously also there's grief and all the things. I needed my husband to be able to make the lunches and take the kids to school and do all of those things without me telling him how to do it. I needed him to know how to do that, right? And in our home, I do mornings by myself. My husband leaves by 6:15, 6:30 in the morning. And so I'm by myself with all four kids from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. when we do school drop off. And so I do lunches and breakfast and school drop offs and backpacks and all that. And I needed to know that despite it not being his everyday task, that I could trust him, right? And that's a big part of this conversation. I needed to trust that he was capable and able to do these things and knew his kids well enough to be able to do all of these things. I didn't have to worry at that point in time that he was going to drop that ball and that I would have to stress about it during this already stressful time. And I think that's a part of this work as well, which is after you flex this muscle enough, and you talk about it enough and you're sharing your experience enough with your partner. My husband has had to work back to back overnights the last 2 days unexpectedly. It did not throw a wrench in my day in the way it might have previously because he does dinner every single night typically and I do pickups and I'm able to still navigate that well enough because we are in the know on why and how we're each doing things. It's not like they're happening in a silo. Like he has no clue what I'm doing and I have no clue what he's doing.
Yeah.
We're communicating all of the time in an effort to be as supportive as possible to each other all of the time. And that's I think a big part of the goal too, which is this inherent trust that your partner's got it. Like they've got it. They can do it. It's good. Your kids are in good hands. Your home is in good hands. And I think that's a frustration for a lot of women, which is if I leave, the house is in disrepair, or the kids only had pizza for 4 days. And you want to leave knowing that you can trust your partner and that they know what's happening and you have full faith in them. And I think that's a part of this work.
Yeah, I love that. That's exactly what it is. It's a trust building thing. It's a we talk about marriage as a partnership. I feel like this is where the rubber meets the road of becoming partners, actually becoming partners. And you said earlier about like I can't remember how you put it, not wanting to like over systematize your life or make it feel like a business or something. But I think we know things in our work lives that get us from A to Z, and we have skills that we use at work. It makes sense to use them at home also. Like if this is helpful for your work life and for running a business, it also will be helpful for running the small business that is your family and your home and your finances and all those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I've gotten pushback sometimes on my content that's like, oh, marriage shouldn't be like a business or along the lines. And it's no, marriage, right? Your relationship shouldn't be a business, but your home might need to run like a business, right? And that's okay, right? I like to say that all of these things we're talking about as they relate to marriage are a symptom of living with people, having children, having a home, right? Like you have to mow the lawn because you have a home. It has nothing to do with your marriage, ultimately, right? And it's not a symptom of marriage. It's a symptom of owning a home with a lawn. And so we're fighting about these things and they impact our marriages. But it's not actually our relationship, right? I've said online, I don't do my husband's laundry. And one woman said, well, then you clearly don't love your husband. And I was like, you know what, though? Laundry has nothing to do with love. Laundry happens because we wear clothes and it has nothing to do with me loving my husband or not, right? Like I loved him 15 years ago when we didn't live together and I love him today. And the laundry has actually nothing to do with it. But I think unfortunately, because of the way we operate, right, as a society and in these single family homes and we treat them like they're part of our marriages, when in reality, our marriage is part of this bigger thing, which is our home and our lives. And we need to work together to navigate those things so our relationship can thrive, right? And so I like to think about it like that. Like, yes, all of these things exist. Yes, they can impact your marriage, but ultimately, you're married to your partner because you think they're funny or you enjoy their like company or whatever. And you didn't marry them because they're good at snow blowing the driveway, right? So it's really navigating these things for the sake of our marriages, right? They aren't our marriages, but they are part of our everyday lives.
And we're navigating them so that they don't ruin the best parts of our marriage because they can.
Exactly. Yeah, of course.
I love this. Do you have any, for women who are like, okay, I have some work to do in this area. Can you give us just like, tell us where we can find you? Tell us, just give us like a next step.
Sure. So I'm everywhere on social media at She is a Page Turner. I try really hard on my platforms to help provide content that can help you at least articulate what's happening, to have examples to walk through with your partner or whomever you're trying to explain it to. Maybe you're just trying to get your mom to understand it, right? I work hard to create content around this topic, but also some of the systemic barriers we talked about earlier. So you can find me everywhere at She is a Page Turner. I also have a newsletter on Substack, and I will be launching an audio course soon on how to talk to your partner about the mental load. So if you're struggling with this or want like a guide to go through it, that will be launching soon. But you can find me everywhere, posting content on this topic pretty much daily.
I love that. Thank you so much for being here, Paige. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.